Hello everyone and welcome to another special episode of Fiscal Fridays. If you enjoy our content, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel to get the latest updates in Idaho politics. Behind the dog and pony show in Washington, D.C. surrounding the debt ceiling is a much more concerning policy discussion. The Federal Reserve is currently studying how best to implement a digital dollar known as the Central Bank Digital Currency, or CBDC. They say this technology would improve financial access to the unbanked population and increase the efficiency of transactions, but it could allow the federal government to control and monitor all your financial transactions, automatically deduct taxes, and directly deposit government handouts. However, the free market has already addressed the problems a CBDC claims to solve through the adoption of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a decentralized digital currency, cannot be controlled by a single entity, and has revolutionized financial access and efficiency. So, how can Idaho leverage the free market to defend financial freedom? IFF president and founder Wayne Hoffman is here to help us break down this issue. Wayne is considered one of the most influential figures in Idaho politics and is an uncompromising defender of liberty. He is also an avid Bitcoiner, working to help others understand the value of a currency that cannot be controlled or devalued by the government. Wayne, thank you for coming on.
Hey, it's great to be here. Especially if we're going to talk about Bitcoin, because I love Bitcoin.
So how did you get into Bitcoin? How did you discover Bitcoin?
You know, honestly, I just got into it. I think conservatives and libertarians talk about Bitcoin quite a bit, and I've been kind of watching it and didn't really understand the nuances of it, and frankly didn't pay a lot of attention to it. And then I looked at it as kind of a financial vehicle, you know, an asset, something that might appreciate in value. You know, that at the time I got into it in early 2017, and I just thought, well, here's something that I could, you know, see, you know, monetary successes from. I could, you know, put a couple $100 in it. Maybe one day it'll be worth $400, and that kind of a thing. But as I learned more about it, I realized that it was something very, very special. It's a digital currency, of course, but there's a limited number. And when you compare that to the fiat money, it's unlimited, right? And you have a government that just prints it into existence. They just fire up the printing press and print more, and they run out, they make more, and of course the value of the dollar declines, and people are pretty much unaware of this. So this notion that you can own a piece of real estate, if you will, it's digital property is what it is. And there's 21 million of it. That's all there'll ever be. You can't knock on the headquarters of the CEO of Bitcoin because there isn't one. There's no headquarters. There's no CEO. And there's no way to make it into, you know, 210 million or 2.1 billion or anything like that. It's just 21 million, and that's all there'll ever be. There's 8 billion people on the planet, so everyone can't own one. And there's no way to change that. It's pretty remarkable. So I just think that when you look at the fiat currencies, it's night and day. I just love that.
And what's funny about the whole thing is that the federal government is trying to basically copycat what the free market has already done, only for their own more
nefarious purposes.
Nefarious purposes.
I mean, yeah. So I mean, yes, there are, besides Bitcoin, there are a lot of other cryptocurrencies that are out there, and there's a big debate within that space about whether those are legitimate or what they call shit coins. They're just coins that people produce and want to make a dollar off of, and then they pull the rug out, and the investors are left with holding the bag. And that is true for some. There's some innovation, I think, and some interesting ideas that are taking place within the cryptocurrency space. But there's something very special about Bitcoin. But to your point, yes, the free market has been working on alternatives. Bitcoin, I think, is the leader of that paradigm. But there's no reason to have to create anything, because if you're worried about the unbanked, anybody can have a Bitcoin wallet, and they don't need to go to a bank. They don't need to go to some kind of central authority and get permission, and no one controls it except for the owner of that wallet.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting. So with the CBDC, a lot of states are trying to ban it right now. And what they've, Florida was most recent to do this just a couple weeks ago. And what they've done essentially was they had a definition of what money is in their state code, and they excluded a CBDC from that definition of money. But the problem is the CBDC is so new that we don't really know what it's supposed to be. And some have even argued that it's not really going to be money at all. It's just going to be a way for the federal government to monitor how money is moved and distributed. Right. And so what's your take on how states are responding to this? Is it too soon for us to be responding to this? Is there a better way?
Yeah, I read your report on that, and I thought it was very interesting and very insightful. The fact is, you're right. There are a couple of different components, and one of the ones that's being worked on right now is the sort of the framework for the central bank digital currency. Is how do you move assets from one place to another, and is it really money? So there is a concern that what Florida did and what some other states have done doesn't really tap fully into what the federal government is trying to do with the central bank digital currency. Ultimately, I think what they're trying to do is replace fiat with this digital version. And that digital version can be controlled, as you said. It could be something as simple as we're going to take the taxes out of your bank account, or we're going to put some kind of stimulus payment or Social Security payment or Medicare or Medicaid or whatever it is into your bank account, in quotation marks, whatever that happens to look like. But it could be something even more dangerous, such as, you go to the McDonald's and you attempt to pay for your Big Mac and fries, and the register goes, oh, sorry, Mr. Hoffman, according to our records, you've been in here twice this week, already got 2 Big Macs, and your limit, of course, is 2, and you're asking for a third, and so therefore you can't use your central bank digital currency for this purpose, and that's terrifying. And it's not like I'm talking, entirely theoretical, because you see the origins of that taking place in places like China, where your social credit score might determine how much money is in your account or your ability to use, theoretically, your own money. So Bitcoin avoids all of that, again, because it's not centralized in any way, shape, or form. It's not controlled by any government entity. If I were to give you, $1,000 in Bitcoin, I can't go to the government and say, hey, I made a mistake, take that back. They have no ability to do that. The ledger is the code is immutable. The ledger is immutable. The transactions are immutable. And I think that's really brilliant. I mean, that's even better than when you look at Ethereum, which, I've dabbled in Ethereum as well. Ethereum being another digital currency. It's the second largest digital currency next to Bitcoin, and there was kind of a scandal about 3 or 4 years ago where a transaction was made with some nefarious bad actors, and the decision was made to reverse those transactions. They basically forked the code. Now you have ETH, which is the main Ethereum code, and then you've got Ethereum Classic. Because somebody chose that they were going to ignore the transactions that were made that were below board. So that's a thing that's a function of the absolutism of the law of cryptocurrency, or the law of Bitcoin in this particular case. You can't undo that. You can't unwind something. And in the case of the central bank digital currency, they can unwind it, they can multiply it, they can subtract from it, they can restrict it, they can turn certain wallets on or off. I mean, so that is something that you don't get out of Bitcoin.
Absolutely. And there's a really good culture in Bitcoin, too. They don't want it changed. So when they propose changes and they want to fork the code and things like that, nobody really goes along with it.
No, it could take years to do that. So they'll talk about a change. So Taproot is the latest example. And by the way, when it comes to the technicals of how all those different code changes work, I'm not an expert on that at that level. But Taproot was the one that gave you the ability to put what do they call them? NFTs essentially onto them. They call them ordinals on the Bitcoin blockchain, so you can have these graphical designs and things like that that get attached to a particular Satoshi, which is the unit, the smaller unit, you know that, of Bitcoin, because you can buy, people don't know, you don't have to buy just one Bitcoin, you can buy a fraction of Bitcoin, those are called Satoshis. And so you can attach these graphical images to them, and so it is that's the analogous to the NFTs on the various other crypto changes, and that took years to implement. And once that was implemented, people realized, oh, I could also create, an offshoot of coins, and they call them the BRC20 tokens. But the ERC20 tokens, which is the offshoot of the Ethereum network, which has produced all these other subcategories of cryptocurrencies, have been around for years. And people have said, oh, we can do that on Bitcoin too. But it takes a much longer time because the network is so secure, and because the ability to change anything in Bitcoin is extremely difficult, very, very difficult, which is great.
That is great. It adds that extra layer of security that even fiat doesn't have. Now, on this central bank digital currency, it's important to note that there is also a social justice element to this whole thing as well. So we mentioned earlier the unbanked population. And what's really interesting about that is you start digging into the definitions of what does the federal government consider unbanked. And it's not just people that don't have bank accounts. It's people that don't have enough money to be able to get loans and things like that. So instead they get access to like payday loans and other ways to make ends meet. And so the government's looking at this as a way to basically pool all the money together and offer government versions of these loans to the unbanked population. And so it sounds like it's an even worse situation than what we just had with people with higher credit scores having to subsidize people with lower credit scores. It's an even worse situation than
in the mortgage industry.
Exactly, yeah. or it's like a banking crisis on steroids. If the reason why you don't loan things out to people that can't pay it back is because they can't pay it back. Then it's no longer a loan, and so does this sound like banking crisis 2.0 to you, that's in the works with the advent of a CBDC?
I have kind of a different spin on it, if you will, and I think that's certainly a part of it. But the government colludes with a lot of industries. I don't want to name them all because we'd be here all night, but it colludes with the education industry, it colludes with the medical industrial complex, and it really does collude with the banking industry. And you see that in the way a lot of policies come out to play. So, for example, 401ks. And that's also with the investment banking, the investment sector. 401ks, that's where you do your retirement accounts, and health savings accounts. You have to go through a bank. You can't just put some money aside somewhere and suddenly it's a health savings account. Same is true for the education savings accounts, the federal 529 accounts. They're basically designed to push money into the financial industry sector. That's what it's designed to do. So everything they do is designed to get you to deposit money with them, and the laws are written in such a way as to make sure that you're doing business with them and also that you're taking loans through them. So they want people to borrow. The financial industry sector wants you to have debt. Everything is built around that. Your credit score is based on your debt, how many credit cards you have, how many bank accounts you have, do you have a savings account and a checking account, all those things. So it's a level of control where you're manipulated by these various regulations that are done, supposedly in your best interest. We're going to make these things available to you. And so, yeah, of course. And the interesting thing about, Bitcoin, Bitcoin, again, it being digital property, you can collateralize that. You don't need a bank for that. So you could theoretically put up a certain amount of Bitcoin and receive, some kind of maybe it's fiat money to perform some kind of transaction, but you don't necessarily have to go through the banking system to do that. So all these things kind of upend, and you do that with other cryptocurrencies as well. There are a lot of protocols out there, and again, this is controversial because a lot of people don't like these other protocols, but certainly they're at least experimenting with things that are outside the banking industry, which I find really interesting, where you can go online, you can take a certain amount of Ether and put it into a protocol, and then you receive USDCs or USDTs or TUSDs or some kind of stable coin back, and then you can use that to transact commerce using those things. The point is to say that people are dabbling with things outside of an industry that has been around for centuries. And because of that, it's outside of the government's control. So, of course, the government likes to control you, and because the lobbyists work the politicians who operate the bureaucracy, they want to retain control. And being that it's all about control, there are losers in those equations. It's people who can't get loans for a variety of different reasons because they don't qualify in certain ways, or people who are getting loans who don't qualify, and then we're subsidizing those loans as taxpayers, and on and on and on you go. Mm-hmm. The entire system is born of corruption. And the great thing about Bitcoin is there's no parliament, there's no legislature, there's no general assembly, there's no city council, there's no state government, city governments, county governments, federal governments, anywhere that control the thing. It's all off on its own, and the code is the law, and how you transact with that code is all that matters.
Absolutely. So I think that's all the time we have.
That's
today.
It? That's all we have? I was just getting warmed up. Crying out loud.
How about one more question?
Okay.
So one of the biggest controversial points that people will bring up, well, Bitcoin's a public blockchain. So what about privacy on Bitcoin? So what is your response to somebody who's concerned about privacy on the Bitcoin blockchain?
Well, there are tools out there being developed all the time. There are tools in existence that allow people to have a modicum of privacy when it comes to the transactions they engage in. Mm-hmm. And of course, Bitcoin wallets, you can add more wallets. You can have as many wallets as you want. They're yours. They belong to you. If you feel that your security has been compromised, it's not very difficult to have a new wallet and transfer money. There are mixing apps and programs that allow you to put your Bitcoin in, and it comes out into a different wallet, and your transactions are fairly transparent, are fairly opaque, I guess, as the case may be. Traceable to some degree, but certainly more traceable than money, but more private than say your transactions via your American Express card, as the case may be. But I wanted to get back to you mentioned what the state of Idaho can be doing and should be doing. I think Idaho should own some Bitcoin, and frankly, those are the transactions you don't want to be opaque. I want to be able to see my money come in, and it goes into different agencies, and I know exactly what it's being spent on. And I've said that to policymakers in the past, and wouldn't it be cool if I knew that I paid a certain amount of my taxes in Bitcoin, and that Bitcoin was then used to buy 7 light bulbs and a pack of pencils at the Department of Education. Why would that be a terrible thing? And not only that, but if I knew the state of Idaho's Bitcoin wallet, I can then look at that wallet and see how much money's in there. With these other accounts, I just kind of take the government's word. They say, oh, yeah, we've got $500 million in the Budget Stabilization Fund. Well, how do I know? Well, because we told you. Well, call me crazy, but I don't trust you. And so there's a certain level of transparency that is very, very healthy that comes with Bitcoin. And also, I think it's a very important thing to recognize today that the money we have in our wallets is worthless, mm-hmm. and made worthless more and more by the day. Folks that are saving are losing, right? If you get paid $100 and you manage to put $10 away in a savings account, you're already losing, right? Because that $10 is quickly evaporated, it's turned into $8. And I mentioned this in a letter we sent to some of our donors, or sending to our donors, that it wasn't that long ago that a family could subsist on a single breadwinner. Mm-hmm. And today you need two breadwinners to pay the same bills, and it's still probably not enough to be able to pay the bills. It's because of the devaluation of the dollar. If you look at a coin, coins used to be silver, right? You would have a silver coin, and then they started adding copper and various other less valuable ingredients into that fiat money, and suddenly it's worth less than the money that's printed on it. And so this is the problem that I think Bitcoin helps solve. So the fact that we're sitting on a huge amount of cash, we ought to be buying gold, silver, and Bitcoin to put in the treasury. And so that's one. A lot of states have gone to accepting Bitcoin for tax payments. That's fine and everything. I think that the state ought to protect Bitcoin mining. Mm-hmm. There are states where I own some Bitcoin miners. Some of those states don't tax the miners; they put sales tax on them. Some of those states have been proactive in saying, we're not going to do anything to tamper with your power or tax your power or turn off your Bitcoin miners if we decide to turn them off in some kind of way. So those are very, very important protections that the state of Idaho could put in. Right now, if I'm a Bitcoin mining company and I want to put a series of miners, several hundred miners into a operation in a state, the last place I would go is Idaho, which is very unfortunate because power is so cheap here. But you'd be better off in some instances to go to Texas because of the taxes. Iowa is another really good state. There are just a lot of states where Florida's another one. There are a lot of states where it's better to do Bitcoin mining, and that's a huge industry. It's a multi-million-dollar investment in capital. You have employees that are operating those machines and cleaning them and making sure they're in working order and doing maintenance on them. But for some reason, people don't want to do that in Idaho, and the primary reason is the tax policy and the fear that the government or through the Public Utilities Commission will turn off those miners because they choose to. So Idaho, there's a lot of things the state could be doing, in addition to protecting the state against protecting its citizens against central bank digital currency, because it is a huge concern, and that is, I think, an untapped area that a lot of states really haven't done a good job in pushing back against. So I think that lawmakers really need to take this situation seriously, look at Bitcoin as an opportunity to do some wonderful things for everybody, poor, middle income, and wealthy alike, and also not help the industry, but get out of the way of the industry, so that it can continue to keep a secure monetary network that is working all over the world and has done a lot of good in improving the human condition.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you let the free market go, the CBDC will pretty much be obsolete by the time it comes out.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't see any use case for CBDC except for to control people. Yeah. Whereas Bitcoin is the exact opposite. Is that? By the way, there's a story, and I don't know if it's true or not, but people say it all the time. It was like, well, the Romanovs, when they were fleeing Russia in 1918 during their revolution, supposedly it took a long time to kill the family because their clothing was stuffed full of silver, because that's sound money. Silver is sound money. Gold is sound money, and it has value. With Bitcoin, you can take it anywhere. I don't have to stuff my. By the way, the Romanov story. There's some people say that was true. Some people say it's not true. I love history, and so I talk about that occasionally as being kind of an interesting concept. And if you have to flee the country, or flee your state, or whatever for some kind of revolution, and even if you don't need to, if you've got to pack up and go anywhere, you take your Bitcoin with you, and it's just so super easy. I can transact hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars in very, very little time, millions of dollars even, using the Bitcoin network. Mm-hmm. I could give $30 million to a guy in Japan. He'll have it in an hour. Whereas if I try to do that in gold and silver, it might take me a bit more time. And then certainly if I try to do that through the banking system, days will pass unless you're going to wire the money, and then there's a fee involved in that and so forth. But I'm just saying Bitcoin has so much utility And I highly recommend that people who are concerned about sound money look at three things: gold, silver, and Bitcoin. And if you don't believe me, listen to a guy like Robert Kiyosaki, who's been talking about this for years, or Michael Saylor.
That's a good one.
He's been talking about this. There's a lot of resources out there to talk about why this Bitcoin network is more than just some kind of crazy investment scheme where I'll put money in when it's $26,000 and maybe in the future it'll be worth $50,000 or $50 million. It's more than that. It's ownership of digital property that is non-confiscatable, and that makes it very, very special. The central bank digital currencies are a threat. They're a threat to our ability to make decisions on our own. They're a threat to the government controlling the purchases we make, snooping on our purchases, deciding what we can and cannot buy, punishing us or rewarding us for certain types of economic behavior, and taking money in and out of our accounts because they do it on a whim. So if you don't know much about this, I'm always happy to talk to people about it. I think it's a very, very fascinating area. But the state does need to do more to recognize that CBDCs are a huge threat, and Bitcoin is a huge solution to that threat.
Absolutely. Last year you sent me to the Bitcoin conference.
Yes, I did. I was going to go myself, and I couldn't make it for some reason. But yeah, how was that?
That was wonderful, and it was interesting because there was a perspective I hadn't considered before that was popular among the attendees, and that was that Bitcoin is freedom of speech, actually, and the rationale behind that is that if you memorize your seed phrase to access your Bitcoin wallet, that's all you need to be able to access it anywhere in the world. And that also prevents them from being able to take that from you. They can't take that from you. And so what you end up having is, even in China, where Bitcoin is banned, they still hold a sizable share of the mining and the use of Bitcoin in that country. And this is a country with a CBDC. This is a country that is among the most authoritarian communist nations in the world. And yet Bitcoin is still able to not only be there, but prosper.
Yeah, they can't shut it down. And people will say things like, well, but what if they shut down Bitcoin? Try. You'd have to shut it down in every single country on the planet, and that's not going to happen. I mean, there will always be somewhere that there are miners operating, somewhere where the transactions are happening. It's just impossible. And you're right. I mean, I find it very difficult to memorize my 24-word seed phrase. So I don't know that I'm going to be doing that. But I do have control of it. I have ways of keeping that information safe, and I have. And it belongs to me, and it belongs to no one else. And it's, I think, way more secure than my bank account. I mean, you see what happens with banking. There are runs on the bank, and the bank using fractional reserve banking, they don't actually have your money over there, but my Bitcoin's always there. You can't have a run on Bitcoin. There's no way to do that. I mean, it's possible that, people will sell a lot of Bitcoin and your price will go down, but your Bitcoin will still be there. It'll still be active. It'll still exist, and there's no way to take that away from you. So I think it's a pretty remarkable innovation, and I'm just delighted. Bitcoin was born roughly the same time as the Freedom Foundation was born. Coincidence? I don't think so.
Amazing. Well, Wayne, thank you for joining us today and helping us understand this issue better. And we'll have to talk about Bitcoin more often on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to talk about.
Awesome. So everyone, thank you for watching this insightful conversation with Wayne. To see more of Wayne's work or other content from the Idaho Freedom Foundation, please visit idahofreedom.org.